letting us know what you're up to and what you've been doing. So at this moment, I'll hand over to our organizers as we kickstart the program. Stay tuned for better information ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paris. Thank you to everybody who has joined so far. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Denise Wambuma. I work for Children's Mission Africa as a communication officer, K4R. Right now, I also work for K4R. So for those of you who might be new to Kenya for Resilience, there is a link that has been posted by one of my colleagues in the chat box. I think I can just ask her to share it again. So you can find out more information about Kenya for Resilience, what we do, and why we've called you here, basically. So I will briefly introduce my other colleagues from K4R CMA, and then I will introduce our very able moderator, Paris, who has so far been doing a fantastic job getting people to communicate, getting people to network. So thank you so much, Paris, for that. As we do the introductions, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You can share any questions, any comments that you might have. Tell us where you're from. I can see that we have a lot of new faces in this webinar, which is very exciting. So we have Paris Azimale, who is our Community of Practice Coordinator. I will just ask my colleagues from CMA K4R to put on their cameras very quickly so that people can see who they are. Okay. So unfortunately, Paris cannot switch on her camera, but we have Gibson Waita, who is our program manager. I will ask him to say something shortly. And then we have Elkana Karanja, who's our program assistant. I will also ask him to just put on his camera and wave or say something. We have Paris and we have myself. So Gibson, you can say hi to us, share something. I have also seen Azimale has also posted the link to our website. Feel free to look at that. You can join K4R as a member. We are very excited to build resilient communities. And it is clear that we're not only building them in Kenya, but even throughout Africa. So welcome. Thank you so much. Gibson, please say something.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Denise. And it's a good afternoon to everyone. Glad that you are joining us from wherever you are. Yeah, it's a chilly afternoon here, of course, in Nairobi, but we are glad that we have been able to manage to join this. I think for me, it's just to invite everyone for this particular webinar. Of course, in today's world, matters resilience are quite important, discussing concepts that come with that, the concepts of adaptive management, et cetera, et cetera. So it is just to welcome everyone. Looking forward to, having a lot of learning that you're going to pick from this particular webinar today. And of course, also feeling free and requesting you to interact with us as much as possible, of course, using the chat box whenever you can. Yeah, and actively taking part in this. We are expecting, of course, quite knowledgeable experts in this particular area of field. And so it will be a benefit for everyone. So most welcome. Please feel that you are part of this and take active participation in this. Otherwise, thank you so much. And I give it back to Dennis for us to be able to proceed. Thank you, everyone. My name is Gibson Moita. As my colleague said, I work for Children's Mission Africa. I'm the lead of the Resilience Program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gibson. So now I will, for those who did not get a chance to meet our moderator, Paris, who joined earlier and she was interacting with a few people, I will just introduce her and then hand over the program to her so that we can continue. So Paris Ramas is the youth lead, and co-director of Star of Hope CBO. She's a climate scientist actively specializing as a partnerships and sustainable innovations professional. Presently, she rallies for poverty eradication measures at the grassroots level as part of Star of Hope CBO and quality education access as Global Youth Ambassador at Their World. She's an active technician on sustainable innovations, currently involved with the Nguge Hills Wellness Lodge on a part-time basis, building relationships between NHL and its various stakeholders, coming up with creative, environmentally mindful solutions whilst empowering the locals. She volunteers in her Maasai community through the Star of Hope CBO, where she is involved in youth and adolescents mentorship and community empowerment. She's a passionate eco-innovator, creating sustainable solutions with particular interest in poverty alleviation. She's an active member of the Global Citizen Network, Youth Ecosystem Restoration Communities at Young GO, and she is also the founder of the Catalyst for Innovative Change Alliance. Welcome, Paris. We're so excited to have you, so excited for you to moderate this session. I can't wait to see what you have for us. You can take it from here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Denise. Thank you for that elaborate introduction of myself. It's always an honor when you hear someone else introducing you so elaborately. So I won't take much time. I believe we are really yearning to hear a lot from our speakers of the day. I will just go ahead and introduce our next speaker, who will be taking us on our topics of discussion today on our webinar. So sorry for that. I'm not able to put my video on due to network issues. I really don't want this network to act on me. Yeah, because it really was doing it earlier. So I looked for a way to, a risk management way. So our next speaker will be speaking to us on climate resilience building in communities. And just as we were having brief introductions earlier with members, like colleagues who joined in, I could hear that some of them, like from what I could pick up, is that majority of them were really working. That word resilience was coming out in most of the conversations that we were having earlier on before the session began. So I want to assure you that we'll get we are in the right place and we are getting the right information on how to go about that. So Lilian Mugi is our next speaker. I want to briefly introduce her, then let her pick up from there. So Lilian is a regional project officer at Plantivo Foundation. So maybe for those, the people who consult Dr. Google, I hope you are up to speed finding out Plantivo Foundation. Where is it? What does it do? Yeah, you'll find Lilian there. So Lilian is incredibly knowledgeable and experienced in mangrove ecology and engagement of communities in nature-based solutions. She has been actively involved in research in blue carbon ecosystem, people, and climates for the past decade. That is 10 years. So this work we are still on the journey. Her research has contributed significantly to mangrove research, policy and community development, both in Kenya and the Western Indian Ocean region. She holds a BSc in Natural Resource Management from Egerton University and an MSc Environmental Science. She is currently pursuing a PhD in Marine Ecology in Edinburgh Napier University. So I believe, colleagues, from that introduction, we are having a resourceful colleague here who will open our eyes and give us detailed insights on climate resilience and within communities. So Lilian, you can pick up from there. Welcome very much.
Thank you, Paris. I'll switch on. If it acts up, I'll switch it off. Don't worry about seeing my face on two screens. I prefer to work like so. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. My name, as said, is Lilian. I'm based at the coast of Kenya, which is currently rainy. So I thought of how to go about our presentation today, and I thought the best way would be to give you talk about climate resilience and community resilience based on what I do. So I work with Plantivo, and I'm going to give you a presentation here. Okay. Yeah, so I look forward to further questions. This is a new forum for me. Having not interacted with most of us here, I'm unsure about how to go about it. I'll try not to be scientific. I'll try to be a bit neutral, but I look forward to your questions for further clarification. So yeah, I'll talk about climate resilience and how we can build this with communities as well to ensure that all is well. Okay. So I'll engage you in a small video first. No, it's not about nice and lovely. I think internet is acting because it's playing on one side.
Maybe as Lilian organizes herself, maybe just take your time slowly, because we really need to see that video. Like I'm all eyes.
I'm
there,
almost.
so.
I think the internet is very down today because I've been trying to join the Zoom for like 20 minutes and it failed, so I had to switch to the mobile network. But then it's still yeah. So it's
Sorry
playing on one side, but I guess it's not loading. So
In the meantime, as we wait for Lilian to organize herself, so just to bring you up to speed, a few housekeeping rules. In case you're not the speaker, please stay on mute so that you don't interrupt the speaker. At the same time, if you want to ask a question, you can type it on the chat box. You can also raise your hand for turn taking so that we have an organized session. We will have a question and a Q&A session at the end of every speaker. So in case maybe you would want to wait for that session, you can raise your hand at this session and ask your question. Yeah, so I think that's it. I think maybe Lilian is. Are you okay now, Lilian?
Just keep on. Give more housekeeping.
Okay. Okay, you can let me know when you're ready, maybe in the chat box or something. Yeah.
If it fails, just keep it.
Okay. Okay. Fine. So yeah, those are the few housekeeping rules. And just to bring you up to speed on our webinar organizers. Our webinar organizers are K4R, that is Kenya for Resilience Community of Practice, which is a network that seeks to build resilient communities through collaboration, partnerships, knowledge, and experience sharing in the field of resilience. So K4R was founded by 10 SMC-funded CSOs that came together and designed the K4R community of practice. So currently, K4R membership stands at 80 national and international organizations and over 180 individual members. So before it gets to 500, I'm not sure whether it is gotten there or not. Please ensure you are within that bracket. You know, founders are always very key. So when they say we founded, be among, you know, the first one. So the main objective of the community is to contribute to the substantial reduction of disaster risk and losses in lives, livelihoods and health in the economic, physical, social, cultural, and environmental assets of persons, businesses, communities, countries, as indicated in the Sendai framework for disaster reduction, risk reduction, expected outcome by 2030. So that's the main objective. So if you know that maybe you're working, you know, within that scope, just know that you are in the right place. And by signing up to be a member, you will be joining the right, you'll be bringing in your force to the right place. So our webinar today, like, I didn't mention this earlier, but our webinar today is aimed at capacity strengthening of our community of practice members. And we believe that even you, in your own small way, you know, you are our community of practice member. You know, you're there doing something. In that small village, you're doing something, so you are our member. So the webinar is aimed at capacity strengthening of our COP members on matters climate adaptation and resilience in program implementation and community engagement. So for me, I believe that we have very nice ideas in mind on paper, but when it comes to implementation and how we engage the stakeholders, I think that's where we face challenges. So I see this webinar as eye-opening to most of us, as an eye-opening session to most of us, to let us know, like, how do we go about effective implementation of our programs? Because we have very beautiful programs on paper and in mind as well, but we are here to learn today how to do it very well. At the same time, how to engage the stakeholders who are involved. Most of the time, the communities, you know, if it's at the village, there's a community involved. If it's a school, it's a community of, you know, students or pupils. So there's always a community involved in a project. And then we have, as you can see, maybe on our posters, there is, and as you can see, most of our organizers are from Children Missions Africa. CMA is on a mission to make life better for every child in Africa. So CMA is the secretariat for the K4R COP. So, so that's why you're seeing majority of them here. So I think I'll stop there. I think she's ready. Thank you. You can proceed.
Thank you, Paris. I'm sorry, I'll not play the video, but I'll share the link later so you can watch. But it's going to be more like a simplified summary of what I'm going to discuss today. So I'll be talking about Plantivo, as I mentioned earlier. So what is Plantivo? It is a charitable foundation which deals with voluntary carbon certification. So it's a carbon standard, and it has over 25 years of experience supporting communities to engage in the carbon market. And mostly these are climate sensitive communities, like most of us. I want to appreciate here that we are working with communities because of climate issues. So we believe with working with communities which are directly affected in this, and mostly you'd find that this would be rural communities or just smallholder farmers. So our model is centered around this with a lot of interaction and engagement of the same group of people to get them to do sustainable projects that will benefit them, their livelihoods, benefit the environment, and benefit them in terms of climate. So we help them to access the voluntary carbon markets, where they get a benefit of at least 60% from the sale of fairly traded, keyword there, fairly traded carbon credits. That is very important. So we make sure that we are not doing dirty work to produce dirty carbon credits. And we have adopted a holistic approach where we look at not just the carbon which is being generated, but have the carbon as an enabler for long-term sustainability of what these communities are engaging themselves in. So just to give a brief, I want to assume that not everyone may be conversant with what carbon markets are. So with the climate issues being noted in the late decade of the last century, we had an Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, where the UNFCCC was came up, and then this is where, like 2 years later, where we had the Plan Vivo concept come up because of the discussions that came from this summit. And we started a project back in 1997 when Kyoto was adopted, though it came into force later in 2005. So this was like the first carbon credit project in the world. And we've developed programs since then up to now. Our most recent standard, is standard version 5 of 2022, which just tends to polish more to ensure that we are doing something. We're not just selling crap. So the market has advanced, and I'm hoping we are conversant with the recent Article 6 from the last COP, with the expiry of the Paris Agreement. So we have two kinds of markets. We have the voluntary and the compliance market. What is the difference? The compliance market will target the Annex 1 countries. These are the developed countries, and it's mandatory, and it's usually government regulated, where you find governments mostly trading and big companies trading with each other. So it would be on strict ETSs, what we call emission reduction targets, or through carbon taxes. So these ones can be used for NDCs, nationally determined contributions. I'm sure most of us have had this in the field now. And again, in this, they're very much regulated right from the international level. Then we have the voluntary carbon markets, which you find most of us engaging in. These are just, as the word says, voluntary. They'd be private initiative-led. And they look at emission reductions. The market is not predetermined, so the prices of the carbon will vary every time. They may be used for NDCs, and now that we have the Article 6, this is changing with the ITMOS and all. And then the regulations may be, they're not as fixed as the compliance, so the international or local regulations. And you can note that in Kenya currently with the climate change amendment bill, they are looking to kind of regulate the voluntary carbon market as it is. So what happens in the voluntary carbon markets? So you usually have a project developer, that is somebody maybe like you, who has a community. So you develop that project, like a proposal of what you'd intend to do. Then you go for a standard. For this case, you can go for Plantivo standard and make sure that you comply to what the standard states in terms of your project development. And then you can start generating, once certified, you start generating your carbon credits, which you can sell to the intermediaries, either a wholesaler or a retailer, who will then sell to the companies. And then when these credits are retired, you get back your money. And when they're retired, we don't mean, we're not talking of retirement, 60, 65 years, we're talking about sold, done. So yeah, so what would ideally happen with this? It's the project scoping. Is it feasible to run a project in this particular area with the ideas you have? Then the development of the project, the certification, what we call a VVB process, that is validation and verification, which is like an audit before the credit issuance is done. Then once this is done, you get into the sales and retirements, and then the funds can go back to the community or those people who are engaged in the project for them to benefit. So there are a number of standards around. We have Plantivo, which the standards are very different. I'll say it's like the way we have different supermarkets, or the way you can have a kiosk here, you can have a big shop there, you can have somebody selling by the roadside. Yeah, that kind of thing. Or even the kind of waters you have. You have Aquamist, you have Keringet, you have all that. So everyone has their own standard of how they do, they package, how they do what they do. So for Plantivo, we have that holistic impact that we do target and the benefit sharing aspect. For the others, maybe not so much. And then also the scale, you find like a standard like Vera, the one that was doing the NRT in the North, goes for large scale, but then they might not dictate how you do your benefit sharing. We have gold standard, which focuses on something else, like mostly energy and the likes. Yeah. Then the American one, which will focus on American, getting American started. So the first project we had, that's 25 years, the first one, after the one we started in 94 and officially started in 97, is a project in Mexico. Maybe you can read more about it, but it's just about the farmers planting trees, doing better management of their land, of their farms. And these are smallholder farmers who then just group up and extend into a big group, form a group, and then they engage in the market. So far we have had sales of over 7 million tons of carbon. And this is planned reduction, not just the reduction that would happen. So this is what we'd call, in the market terms, we'd call additionality. Then we have areas close to 300,000 hectares, mostly forest land under sustainable management. We have engaged thousands of people through this, and many are benefiting from the sales of this carbon. And yeah, we've have total sales of over $40 million US, and so many trees planted. But beyond the trees, we look at biodiversity and how the people are benefiting from this. So I'd like to emphasize on the holistic model. So when you talk about a holistic model, you're talking about a design which is participatory, where the communities are engaged, they understand what is happening, they know their role, and then all legal processes are duly followed. So if it's in a country where you have to pay tax, we want to see if it's matters of tenureship of the area, it's clear and it's not forced on anybody. Nobody is getting hurt because of a project that is being introduced in this. And then we also look at seeing that this is community owned or led, so that we know that they are really benefiting and it's more of a lifestyle change rather than just a business, yeah? Then for the carbon impact, because this is what is tradable in the market, this is the product that you can currently present to the market, there has to be additionality and it's real. It's not something that, like would bring scientific doubt. So there's a lot of science which is involved in this. And then there's a social impact where we are required to see that the communities are benefiting socioeconomically. There's a change in their life, poverty is reducing and all that. And so that's why we talk about at least 60% of what is accrued from these sales goes back to the community. And then now there's a new venture in the field, if I may say. We are looking at biodiversity. We've always worked with biodiversity, but it's never been a product that can be sold. So as Plantivo, we are looking to have what we call Plantivo Nature, where we'll have biodiversity certification, because not everywhere will you have carbon intense areas where you can grow trees and say, I'm sequestering and storing so much carbon. So there are areas which are just rich in terms of biodiversity. So we are looking to see how these communities also can be engaged, or can engage the market in a way that they'll benefit from the kind of resources that they have. Yeah, so why Plantivo? So this is how the market looks like. This is an example of some of the standards and how they sell. So as I told you, I'm not marketing any bottle brand of what can be very neutral, I don't know. Well, but as a person living at the coast, we have fish which has high value. We have fish which has low value, which will come in cheap. So it's the same with the markets. You find that some of the credits generated under the standards fetch higher prices. So for Vivo, because the buyer knows you're not just doing the carbon credits, you're making sure the community is benefiting, you're making sure that there's a biodiversity plus to it, we tend to fetch higher prices in the market. As much as we have such low volumes, you can look at the 2021, yeah? We need to update this because things are getting better. We are looking at even 25 to 40 USD now for a ton of carbon. So as we have very small volumes of sales, but we sell very, very high, as you can see, $11 compared to the other standards. So what would you be required to do this, to meet the standard requirements? Engage the community, make sure the social and environmental risks are going to be well managed, show a theory of change in terms of the three things: the climate, the community, and the biodiversity. Have strong monitoring plans, don't just start and quit. And then the benefit sharing mechanism, as earlier highlighted. Then of course, there's the methodology. Different ecosystems apply different methodologies. So we have our kind of methodologies. At the coast, we have our technical methodologies for mangroves. And then also there's I'd like to add that there's the country laws that you really need to look at, yeah? And then of course, the auditing requirements. So we have projects all around the world. And as you can see from that map, so 28 active, about 40 or more. They keep growing every day, lots of interest from people to want to engage in the market. So now let me bring you home and talk about something that's happening on the ground locally. So blue carbon, what is blue carbon? This is carbon that is found in the oceans. And in this case, we are talking about carbon that is found in vegetated areas of the ocean. So we have forests growing in the ocean, which are called mangroves. And we have grasses also growing there. And this have a tendency of storing so much. Okay, I'm going to respond to your questions later. I see good ones. These ones have tend to store so much carbon in the ecosystem, but because of human needs, because of lack of awareness, they have been degraded for a long time. And I was involved in development of these projects. And as I said, it was need-based, looking at how the system is being degraded. And the area has stored so much carbon over so many years. So depletion of these areas means you're releasing what has been stored for so long, and you're also reducing the capacity of the forest to capture the carbon and store it. So it was a matter of emission and reduced functionality of the forest. So with the community, we looked at how we can do this while not getting anybody to suffer, having fair trade-offs. And so we initiated the first blue carbon project in the world, which is called Mikoko Pamoja. Very famous. I think you've heard the presidents talk about it in a few setups. So with a lot of science, a lot of government partnerships, and a lot of community engagement, we were able to start this, and working with around 500 to 600 households of an area of 117 hectares of mangroves that is now conserved. It was a very degraded area. In the 10 years now since its initiation, there's change in that forest. And the community has been earning. So it's about changing the lifestyle, how they live with the forest. And what this means is they stop the destruction of the forest. They protect the forest. They plant. They take care of it. but they earn money for it. So whatever they would be getting from depleting the forest, they're earning in another way, and it's going to community projects. So this has been a very famous project around the world, and it led to a lot of interest from even local communities. And we expanded this down south of Kenya in a village called Vanga, where now we have a bigger scale of this, and they're doing the same thing and earning more money. So like the last year, the community was getting about 52,000 USD from the sale of carbon, and the value of the carbon is now going up. So they're getting more, and this money is being pumped into community projects. So they've had a lot of awards, including the UN Equator Prize in 2017, among many other awards that I've not included here. And they're looking to now bundle in what we call the seagrass, is the grass that grows under the sea. From the first photo there, you can see that's how the mangroves grow in different settings. The second one is more on a shoreline. So when you come to the coast and see these trees and the grass, don't say the beach is dirty. It's not dirty. It is what it is. So what has been happening with the projects, there's money being pumped in, there are people being employed, so contributing to SDG 1. Education, the money that they get, they've been pumping it back to the schools, to the local schools, buying books, renovating the classrooms, giving bursaries. And recently with the CBC system, they did a lab for one of the communities. All the money goes back to this community. So they chose to do a lab for their junior secondary in a village where that was a dream, yeah? So now you can see a photo there. There's a nice laboratory where the students can learn from. Then, of course, in decision-making, women at least have a say because they're engaged in the committees that run these projects, as well as in decision-making. And I'll talk about women benefiting in the next slide. Yes, like here, you'd find that the women were doing like 5 kilometers to go look for what we call maji matamu. This is fresh water, because being at the coast, when you sink the boreholes, the water tends to be a bit hard. So they'd go very far to get this water. But through the project, they put the money into water projects and bring the water closer to them, where you find that they buy that 1 jerrycan for a shilling, up to 3 shillings, which goes back to just electricity bills for that pumping station and all that. And also water in the schools. The kids would go to school drinking very hard water, but now at least I tell you the water is better. Then again, we're engaging these children for them to learn about the environment. We're doing wood lots for them because we want to appreciate that fuel wood is a necessity in our communities. And we know about 98% of rural people in Kenya are using fuel wood. So how do you cover this? So planting trees, even in schools, just that free land that they see, and you get the children really engaged to the environmental club to do this, and you see they get to really appreciate what the environment is doing to them. Then we also do a lot of training. We have forest scholars who are trained in matters like what you're discussing today and how they can benefit from this. I've seen someone ask how such projects would benefit the climate, but you can see, one, there's a lot of community awareness. These people who, I'll tell you, there's a tendency here, when we have weddings, the best firewood you'd use is mangrove because it has a very high calorific value. But now they know better. So even if they're going to get that wood, they'll not go for something that is living or something that will hurt the environment. So this is really helping them to continue living a comfortable life, but at the same time, live in tandem with the environment and take care of it and benefit from it. I do not want to talk about the benefits of mangroves right now. As a mangrove scientist, I can seem a bit biased, but they are immense in terms of fisheries and other functionalities. So let me skip. Okay, let me talk a bit about this. So when they get money, we've had to deal with issues of period poverty. We had the issue of COVID back then, and people are not able to work. So this money was sent to help people get some rations to sustain them during that period. As you can see there, they were very happy. You know how we like wheat at the coast. So, and then, as I told you, we get a lot of attention globally. It's taking time to load. Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of traveling, a lot of visitors. The photo down bottom left, that is MPs from the region. We hosted members of parliament from Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, just interested to come and see how communities are benefiting. Communities are becoming more resilient with the small resources that they have while they're taking care of them. And then the top left, there you see the Crown Prince and Crown Princess of Netherlands and Sweden, respectively, visiting us with a high delegation, lots of ambassadors there. So we get a lot of attention because of these projects and how they're really working with the community and how the environment is really benefiting from this. So again, I'll talk about another Plantivo project. It's taking time to load. The biggest that we have, which is selling to the upwards of 3 million tons of what we call Plantivo certificates. Yeah. So when you say 3 million, that's 3 million tons of carbon that is being sold. So this is a project in Nicaragua, where again, it's smallholder farmers coming together, doing a lot of agroforestry and sustainable land management. And when the money comes, because now the land is yours, this money ends up benefiting you and continuing the project. So the farmer is happy, the environment with them is happy. So they have money in their pockets, the environment is healthy, so it continues with the functionality. So here we are looking at resilience in terms of livelihoods, resilience in terms of the environment, and of course, that would include the biodiversity. We have another project in Tanzania. It's called the AI Diasi. These are like the Boni community we have in Kenya here. So we have hunters and gatherers as well as pastoralist communities in northern Tanzania who are living in, because of their land system, they're living in somewhat a forest kind of environment. And what is happening is they are protecting this forest. As much as they are using it, they are protecting it. And from this protection, they're able to quantify the additionality, their efforts, and sell the carbon, which comes back to the community to benefit the community as large. So they're also learning a lot. They're also being employed within the project. You can see there, we have one of the hunters who would be going around with a GPS, and they use what we call smart cyber trackers. So the communities are the ones who are doing the implementation. Actually, for like all the projects, that's what you'd find. The community is the one which is doing the groundwork. So when they go, they'll register, oh, we are seeing this kind of animals, this is improving, oh, there's this kind, and even policing the forests. They don't want to see anybody tamper with the environment. They want to see everything to work as they're planning for it to work. So there's a lot of innovation in this because of such projects and bringing the community together as a whole, because resilience again has to come in. We say umoja ni nguvu, yeah? Okay, so we have another project in Fiji. Again, these are people who are depending on those very good rainforests that they have there, but they have learned that we don't have to cut down. A live tree is more valuable than that one which is dead. So they are getting the services that they were cutting the trees down for without cutting down the trees, yeah? Okay, yes, we seem to have a translator. So with the many projects that we have, I'll just summarize this and say, we are seeing changes in, we are contributing to poverty eradication, if that is possible. Yes, okay, sorry. I'm assuming that everybody is a Swahili speaker. I'll strictly stick to the English. So poverty, we have sales of over 17 million US dollars, which is, we can imagine 60% of that going back to the communities. That is quite something that will relieve a lot of pressure for these households. And also, we know poverty is the one that in most cases drives degradation. So again, this means degradation pressure goes down. Then in terms of food security, because we are improving our relationship with the land that we have in terms of the ecosystems and the biodiversity therein. And with better food, with some more money in the pockets, your health is going to be better, and a better environment to make sure that you get clean air and you get the even medicinal values from these things, yeah? Then, of course, you get to see education. I could have pulled another one from Ethiopia. We have another project in Ethiopia, which again is also, it's arranged land. There's no forest. If you look at it, you'd be told it's forest, but you're like, it doesn't look like a forest. Yes, I'm almost done. Okay. Yeah, so in terms of SDGs, we are contributing to, I think, all of the SDGs. And clearly, you've seen even the life below water is well covered. Yeah, I'd add another one on partnerships, because with these projects, you find a lot of interactions and a lot of cooperation is required to make sure that the project is sustainable and successful. And at that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you very much. Over to you, Paris.
Wow, thank you very much, Lilian. That was so timely. I had 2 minutes for you more, but since you're on time, I think the 2 minutes we'll use them for the questions. So that was so insightful. I have so many questions from my end, like my own questions, but without being biased, I'll start with the participants' questions. Bernard Okebe had a question. If Bernard, you can hear us, maybe I can read out your question, but if you can hear us and you have stable internet, you can echo out your question, just so that I don't misquote you. In the interest of time, just so that we don't waste a lot of time, maybe Lilian, you can, Bernard Okebe's question was, what are some of the key approaches for community adaptation, even as we talk of resilience?
Should I take a couple of questions and then respond wholesomely? Or?
Yes. So maybe I can go to the next. Hosea was also asked 2 questions. Hosea, if you can hear us, can you echo out your question? And if your internet is not stable, I can read out for you the questions.
Thank you. I wish you can read on the road.
So thank you, Hosea, for being so fast. What happens? So Jose's questions were: what happens if after 5 years, a forest and a carbon credit program is cleared or burned down? And his other question, I'll try to see, like, to find it. The other question was from Philemon Kurunzinza. He says, we need a clarification on how your Plan Vivo, is a solution to climate change issue. The other question was from Moses Muga. Moses asks that, is it healthy to adopt integration of crop dairy goat production system and promotion of value addition techniques? Yeah, I think you can answer that, then we can add 2 more questions as we conclude.
Okay, thank you, Paris, and thank you all for the questions that you've shared. The first one was on adaptation and communities. When we look at these markets, mostly we'd find they're looking at mitigation and adaptation. So for our case, I'll talk about the Kenyan projects that we have, yeah? We have some which are upcountry, but I'll talk about the ones I see at the coast mostly. So in terms of mitigation, and maybe I thought the organizers next time will start with these terms, because I wish I had started on discussing on what is climate resilience, but I'm assuming the audience is familiar with this, yeah? So in terms of adaptation, in terms of mitigation, it's improving the forest and making sure the forest is able to function as it ought to be. And in terms of adaptation, is getting funds from selling the carbon to put back and fill in and repair what is not working for them. So it's usually a balance of mitigation and adaptation, because in most cases you might not be able to roll back to where you are, but how do you adapt and live with this? So with such a project, you'd be able to formulate one which will adapt either to make sure that the community remains resilient in whichever way this goes, because there are changes where the climate, it takes time to get back to where we'd all desire to be. So there was a question about what happens if in 5 years. So there are 3 terms that we use in climate science. There's something we call additionality, where additionality is about the additional carbon benefits that you'd bring to an ecosystem. So, you know, if you leave a forest to grow, it will just grow by itself. There's nothing you've added there. So what effort have you put in? That's why we have terms like avoided deforestation, so the AR and all that. So that is what would bring in the additionality. And in most standards, actually in all standards, additionality is what gets you the credit to sell. Then there's another term which is called leakage. Now, you cannot transfer a problem from one place to another and say that you're helping. So in proving that you're able to trade, you're supposed to show that, fine, maybe we are doing avoided deforestation or something. I've reduced pressure on this particular forest, but I've not moved that pressure elsewhere. That's why you see in some areas we're talking about community woodlots to covering the fuel needs of the community and such like things. So leakage has to be taken care of. Then there's the third one now that has to be proven is what we call permanence. And permanence goes beyond even the project period. You would not, it is not ethical, and it does not work in this kind of projects in the voluntary carbon, actually in the carbon market, where you'll grow for a certain time and then come and clear, or even clear to start growing. That is not, it's not acceptable. So there's a duration where, because there's someone who'd be thinking, okay, so since we have our Mau forest, why don't we just go and clear it, then now start a carbon project in the name of bringing back the forest? That would not work. And in terms of this permanence, a lot of partnerships are required. You'll find, like in the Kenyan case, if you're going to a community forest or you're going to a government forest, we know we have, like, mangroves are state-owned resources. So there had to be an agreement between Kenya Forest Service and the community that they're allowed to do this. And then the government, under the agency KFS, have to assure that we'll not do this, and then after the project period, you are going to come and put a pot there, for example. So that's not, permanence has to be demonstrated during project development. Then the third question was, how is Plantivo a solution to climate change issues? Well, I'll say Plantivo is not a solution to climate change issues, but it would be a vehicle for communities which are interested to benefit from their efforts, or even to fund. We've had people come and say, I've been doing this for so long, I've been planting trees, but I've been doing it out of pocket. How can I benefit? How can I be able to sustain this project that I'm running? So in that case, if you have a feasible case, you can engage in a carbon market so that you get some funds from your effort to pump back either into the continuation of the project and also to benefit whoever else may be suffering. Because as I said, there must be, there always are trade-offs in whatever case that you engage in. So that is how, as Plantivo, we do contribute to climate change issues, but we would not do it seated here where we are without the communities being interested and wanting to move a step forward with that. Yeah.
Thank you, Lilian. I think you've covered the majority of the questions. There was one question, I think we'll add only two so that we can go on a break. Then we can resume for the next presentation.
There was one from Moses Muga about is it healthy to adopt integration of crop dairy goat production systems? Well, it sounds good. As an ecologist, it sounds good, but it's not my area of expertise. So I'll choose not to address that. Maybe someone in the forum would better be placed to help you with that. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. So I can see Lawrence has his hand raised. Lawrence, you can ask your question as we prepare to take the break, the 5-minute break, then we can resume for the next presentation.
Okay, thank you. Hello, are you able to get me? Hello.
I can hear you from my end.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
I also hope Lilian can hear you.
I can go ahead now. Good presentation over here. I'm interested in the vulnerability of social groups, the nexus, because the project itself, the design is good. And I like how the carbon, the carbon offsetting project you are undertaking, the cost is good, but I'm just trying to look at the vulnerability approach to the social groups, especially now that the resultant effect takes time. For example, the impacts takes a lot of time. How do you, I wanted to get the design on how you are working to involve these vulnerable social groups in the community and how they're able to benefit along the project coastline or along the project implementation timeline, so that they don't wait till to the farthest end to see the benefits, maybe after 5, 6, or maybe 7 years to come.
Okay, thank you for your question. I hope you are listening to the presentation. I'll refer you to our website, planvivo.org, which has all the projects there. So as said, we do not develop projects as Planvivo. We're just a carbon standard. We certify the projects. So the project design and how you want to implement it goes down to you and your community. But what we want to see is that, have you involved the community? What is the benefit sharing mechanism? Does it apply to what we say that at least 60% has to go back to the community? What is the climate benefit? And are you benefiting the biodiversity? So that is what we look at and say, well, if that's what you're doing, then we'll give you a certificate and say we are certified. We are satisfied with what you're doing for you to go sell the carbon. So
thank you.
Let me see how I can demonstrate this better. Yes, sorry.
I get you because I joined the meeting 15 minutes late into the time.
No. Okay, it's okay. So let me just give you an example, yeah?
Yes, please.
Let me go to clothing brands, yeah?
Yes.
Usually you'll go to the market and say, this one comes from this place, so it's not good quality. Because I know they tend to do their clothes in this and this way. Or even food. I'll go to this hotel rather than this hotel because of how they prepare their food. So it's the same way with the carbon standards. So our standard says we need to see this and this and this. Another standard says, I don't care what you do with the community. I don't care what you do with the biodiversity. I just need how much carbon you are sequestering. So for us, we have that kind of thing. But project is developed by you. Then in terms of the benefits, again, it is how you guys decide. If you're saying you're doing annual payments, like for the projects we have in Kenya, all of them are doing annual payments. And most of these projects, they do annual payments. So the money comes at the end of the year after they have submitted a report. Then they are given the certificate. We do not sell the carbon. We just give you the certificate. We value your products. So once you valued your products, like a KEBS stamp, yeah?
KEBS, okay.
And you go out and sell it to whoever you want to sell it. Negotiate your prices out there, but we have to make sure that 60% goes down. And trust me, this is possible. That's why we have the external auditing, the verification and validation, and the annual reports. So if you go to our website, you'll get to see how these projects run. You'll see how they develop. through the development processes. You see how they do the annual reporting and how they sell. So all this information is there. And with that, I'd also talk about, I've seen a very interesting question from Hosea, who is asking about the infrastructures. If you keep up with what is happening in the country right now, they are amending the climate bill to make sure that communities are benefiting. And in this, they're talking about 25% going back to the communities. So at least for our standard, we're talking about 60. So if we come to Kenya, we are within the law of Kenya, which says 25%. So that kind of thing. So every country is very different, but you go to some places or some standards, even 10% for the community. But if any project is under Plantivo standard, 60% has to go back to the community. Then there's one on Baobab. I think we can discuss that after because it's not very much related to this. But for any more questions, you can always reach out to me and ask, and I'll be happy to respond. Thank you. Back to you, Paris.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lilian. Thank you, participants, for being very active and asking very insightful questions. Yeah, it seems we were all, I can see, Mary, you've raised your hand, but time is not on our side.
Just a quick one. Just a quick one.
Okay, that's request. Okay.
All right.
Let it be very fast. And also from Lilian's side, please let it be very brief because time is not on our side. And it seems we will not go for our break. We'll just transition immediately to the next speaker since participants have decided to take break time for tuition. Anyway, yeah.
Okay.
So
Lilian, my question was, is this possible within the urban slum areas? And how would you be able to help the urban slum areas, to develop the carbon credits, and ensure that there's less emission? Just a quick one. Thank you.
Okay. Carbon emissions are from different, if you look at our NDCs, how the country is trying to cover this, we have 4 main sectors. But for us, mostly you'll find the carbon, because of the intensity, the sequestration potential, it will mostly be in what we call the AFOLU sector. That is the agriculture, land, and forest sector. So in urban areas, that might not be very feasible, but we do have energy projects because also we're seeing a lot of emissions from the energy that you're using. That's why, but some of these government initiatives you're seeing are towards this and towards NDCs and to reduce climate emissions. So there's like the tuk-tuks, I'm seeing now they want to go electric, just reduction of fossil fuels and the emissions from the kind of efficiency in terms of fuel wood consumption. So those are aspects you can look at in terms of an urban setting. Yeah, but that would not apply in Plantivo standards because we only deal with AFOLU. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you too. Thank you for keeping it brief. So I will just transition to our next speaker. Our next topic will be on how vulnerabilities and the capacities of the human societies to adapt to climate change. That is our next topic. Our speaker is Ignatius Juma. Ignatius Juma is Senior Project Coordinator at Thomas Reuters Foundation. Ignatius is a dedicated and highly skilled climate and disaster risk reduction practitioner, specializing in the regions of Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Uganda. So that is East Africa, with a profound understanding of the complex climate changes faced by these countries. Juma has emerged as a leading figure in designing and implementing sustainable solutions to mitigate climate change impacts and enhance resilience. He holds a BA in International Studies, a master's degree in Environmental Policy from the University of Nairobi, as well as a master in Agricultural Heritage Systems from the University of Florence in Italy. He's currently a PhD candidate of Environmental Policy at the University of Nairobi School of Law. He has over 6 years of experience in the field of climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. His expertise lies in conducting comprehensive risk assessments, developing robust early warning systems, and designing community-based adaptation strategies. So I'm so excited for the next session as well. As we can see, our next speaker is packed with a lot of experience and knowledge in this field. So colleagues, I would like to let in Juma as it takes us to the next session. Thank you.
Wow. Maybe I put on my video. First, so good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I think the moderator has already introduced me, so I won't spend so much time on that. I'll just go direct to the presentation or the discussion we have. I'll try to make it as maybe simple as possible for everyone, but if you think that anything is not clear, of course, I'm happy to respond to your questions after this. And yes, let's see how this goes. So I'll be switching off my camera, just save on the bandwidth as I proceed. But essentially, I was told to try and discuss the vulnerabilities and the capacities of the human society to adapt to climate change. And so when I was looking at it, I was first of all asking myself, like maybe the very basic questions of what is maybe climate change and how is it even affecting people, and like what is the interplay between the climate, the environment, the economy, and the people, and even what is this whole questions of being vulnerable, and also the question of what is to have the capacity, and of course the whole questions of adapting to the changing climate. So just from maybe a definition point of view, this one, of course, trying also to operationalize it, is that to be vulnerable is to have the capacity to be affected by something. So in this case, to be in a position where you can be affected by something. So in this case, if you're vulnerable to climate change, it means that climate changes are able to impact you in one way or the other. So there's this possibility. And then the capacities, capacity is what strengths or what strengths do you have that could be able to help you withstand the risks that would come to you as a result of the changes that are coming with the climate. And of course, to adapt is to be able to live with what is already there and like make it to be like your normal. So this is just my thinking. I'm not trying to go to maybe the classical definitions and the scientific ones, trying to think about it from a community point of view. Like when I'm telling someone that what is to adapt to something, I'll try to use maybe these simple terminologies that I've used. But maybe as a way of introduction, I just want to appreciate that climate change, of course, it's a pressing global challenge that poses significant risks to the environment, the economies, and of course, the human societies. So it's not just a Kenyan thing or a particular community thing. It's everyone is involved, everyone is affected. So the impacts, of course, of climate change, such as rising temperatures, extreme weather events, sea level rise, and of course, changing precipitation patterns, they expose vulnerabilities with human societies. So just to narrow down more further is that to appreciate the fact that human societies face various vulnerabilities in the face of the climate change. And these vulnerabilities can be categorized into social, economic, and environmental aspects. So three key sides. And if you can see the diagram from on the right of the presentation, is that for you to achieve what maybe you would call like sustainable development, there needs to be a fair interplay amongst the three categories, the environmental, the economic, and the social, for you to be able to achieve sustainable development. If any of the sectors is kind of left out or maybe over-relied on, you have a problem as the world. So in my next slides, I want to try and discuss the categories of the vulnerabilities and how they can affect people. And just to try and see, like, in each and every sector, we say there's the social, there's the economic, and the social, the environmental, but how is it? So under the social factor, you see there are issues such as the poverty, inequality, limited access to education, and healthcare and marginalization. Like we said, for example, if there is unpredictable precipitation patterns, you find that, for example, smallholder farmers or even large-scale farmers will not be able to access sufficient water to be able to maybe to water their crops. And thus, they'll not be able to have enough food even for themselves. So the questions of food insecurity comes into play here. And also, if they're producing these maybe food crops for sale, to be able to earn some income, to be able maybe to take care of their other family needs, like maybe education and health, it means that they will not be able to do it, because if there are no rains, it means that there's no water to them for them to be able to cultivate their crops and maybe also earn their income. From an economic point of view, climate changes, of course, they pose also risks to industries, livelihoods, and the economic stability of nations. So, for example, we can also look at this currently in the country, where we've been seeing that because of maybe climate change is one of the factors that has been happening in the country, that we don't have sufficient food. And as such, the price of food have continued to go up each and every time. Of course, this is putting so much economic pressure to the citizenry. And that's why, for example, we see even the political class is kind of every day standing up, trying to ensure that they go for the famous maandamano to try and see if they can push the prices down. Of course, I'd like to appreciate the fact that maybe it's not just the climate change as the only contributing factor to food prices increase in Kenya. Maybe there are also other factors, but I think climate change could be one of the factors. So I'm appreciating the fact that sectors such as agriculture, of course, they're affected when the climate changes, fishery, of course, tourism, in the sense that animals will not be able maybe to withstand the climatic conditions of a country and maybe migrate to other areas where they have favorable conditions. And as such, if tourists were coming to a country to see maybe these particular animals, it means that they will not be able to come again, because in any case, the animals have moved. Infrastructure also is not left out, because sometimes you see that, for example, if you have erratic rainfalls, infrastructures are destroyed. And this, again, has an impact on the entire economic spectrum of a country. And like I'd say that also small-scale farmers and coastal communities and low-income communities are at high risk due to their dependency on climate-sensitive resources and limited adaptive capacities. So if you are a farmer and you only rely on the rainfall, or if you are someone at the coast, and like the previous presenter said, maybe you rely on the mangrove trees, and because of climatic changes, these ecosystems are destroyed, it means that you'll not be able to continue earning maybe resources or money to sustain yourself. And as such, you become more poorer and poorer, and maybe life becomes even more unbearable to such communities. From the environmental perspective is that if you look at the environmental component, you have to look at it from an ecosystems and biodiversity approach, because climate change affects ecosystems, and this leads to habitat loss, species extinction, and disruptions, especially in the ecosystem services. So we know, for example, that there are people that use the environment or the ecosystem services, for example, for cultural services, such as maybe prayers, and maybe in this case, we can say the Mijikenda community and the Kaya forests when they're going there. But also, we know that carbon sequestration, like the previous presenter said, that the trees, for example, they help a lot in carbon sequestration. And if these systems are destroyed, it means that we will not be able to have this. But also, there's also the provisioning component, where we know that we get, for example, fruits and other edibles from trees. So if this is destroyed, it means that an entire, again, livelihood is destroyed. Also, it's important to appreciate the fact that fragile ecosystems like coral reefs, wetlands, and forests face increased stress and reduced resilience in the face of climate change. Of course, all these changes on the environment, they have a cascading effect to human societies. And like I had noted earlier, because the ecosystems provide essential services that are of great use to human societies. So here I'd like to just try to look at climate change from a global perspective and try to ask ourselves, but what is the global arena saying about climate change and the changes we are seeing today? So this is a quote from the UN Secretary General, Guterres, when he was asked about what he thinks about the current system and where he is, he said that if he had us to select a sentence to describe the state of the world, he will say that we are in a world in which global challenges are more integrated and the responses are more and more fragmented. And if this is not reversed, it is a recipe for disaster. So again, it's not just a question of maybe of Africa or maybe poor nations, but it's a global thing. It's a global challenge that even the community of states is trying to see ways of how to be able to deal with it. Just also to note from a global perspective again, the Global Sustainable Development Report of 2019 stated that unless there is a fundamental and urgent change in the relationship between people and nature and significant reduction in inequalities between inside countries, any progress of the last 2 decades risk being undone. So like this could be eroded. So again, we see that there's greater emphasis on the need for the interaction between people and the environment to kind of be managed well so that not to erode the gains that we made over the years, because again, like the predecessor said, that for many times that people that kind of are poor and because of their over-reliance on the environment, sometimes they end up maybe overusing it and as a result also being able to like degrade it. So like this report was just pushing for the fact again that we need to ensure that this balance is attained. Otherwise, we risk losing the gains we made over the years. Again, from a global perspective, just looking at the IPCC special report on the ocean and cryosphere on a changing climate sites, rapid changes to the ocean and the frozen parts of our planet as warning signs of impending systemic failures. So like I'm just trying to appreciate the fact that this is also like a global problem and people are looking at it from different perspectives and also from different angles. So the IPCC also notes that climate change and land states that, so the IPCC special report on climate change and land, it notes that far-reaching action across several areas is required also for the conservation and restoration of ecosystems and biodiversity. So because of the changing climate and all these things, of course, we see that there have been like emergence of disasters that communities and nations are dealing with every day. So the question all over the world is how are we able to deal with these emerging problems and how do we even live now with the current realities that we have in front of us? And again here, I just try to look at the Sendai framework. So maybe coming down to the topic of today, trying to look at how communities can be able to adapt and live with the changing climate. So the Sendai framework has targets that it has set up for countries to be able to achieve. This was being said to be achieved by 2030, and specifically target E was being set to be achieved by 2020. So the target was aiming at substantially increasing the number of countries with national and local disaster reduction strategies, of course, by 2020. So again, we see that at the global level, this problem has been appreciated. Now it's being pushed down to respective countries to be able to come up with local strategies to deal with disasters and risks that are associated with the changing climate. And so in this case here, I think we come to a key theme of the day, which is that how do you link climate action and DRR? DRR in this case meaning disaster risk reduction, that how do you achieve coherence between the two subjects to ensure that the people continue to live and survive even in a changing climate. Just to note again, from a global level, there's the appreciation of the fact that to achieve some of these results is that you cannot do it as an individual state or even a single community. There's need for continued partnerships amongst partners on different levels. If it's at the state level, maybe to partner with other nations at the global level and to ensure that the problem of climate change is tackled in oneness and not as single individuals. Because again, we all know that we cannot address the challenges of climate change as single entities. But then the whole question of today that I was asked to speak about is how the communities can be able to adapt and live, of course, in the changing climate. And just to appreciate the fact that disasters occasioned by natural events or anthropogenic factors will continue being around. So because we know that the environment, the climate is going to continue to be changing unless, of course, we take necessary measures to ensure that we achieve the targets, for example, that have been set out in some of the global agreements, such as the Paris Agreement. And so for this discussion, I just want to look maybe not so much into detail, but on the question that how can communities be able to build their own resilience in the face of growing risks to disasters caused by both anthropogenic and natural factors. So we know, for example, that we work with communities probably in our respective organizations that are being faced with this challenge of climate change each and every day. But the question is, how do we enable our communities to be able to face this monster called climate change and to be able to live with it? And so here is where the aspect of DRR comes in, disaster risk reduction. That we know that even though we are facing challenges each and every day, that we can be able to come up with strategies that can help us to be able to deal and cope with the changing environment. So at the community level, we need to appreciate the fact that in the face of the risks at hand, the communities need to survive. That's point number one. Number two is that they must take responsibility for their most at-risk members. We know that, again, we are all in the communities and we have different capabilities. How do we ensure that each and everyone in the community is well taken care of? So the principle of leaving no one out or behind, trying to ensure that this is mainstreamed in the disasters that we face every day. Again, it's just important to appreciate the fact that it's the communities that decide whether the risk at hand requires them to have external support or not. So depending on the assets they have as a community, they can be able to assess and see how or if they will need any kind of external support, be it from government, maybe from the national level, the devolved unit, or maybe also international intervention. Here, I also need to appreciate the fact of resilience. So maybe first just to define what resilience would mean in the face of disaster risk reduction. Resilience here would mean the ability to be able to bounce back after certain shocks have hit a community. So how are you able to come up with this? And also to appreciate the fact that resilience is not merely accumulated physical asset or secure livelihoods, but it is also the will to survive and insistence on the rights to a just and equitable society. So now we've seen like a background from the international perspective where bodies such as the United Nations are discussing the aspects of climate change and how they're causing disasters all over the world. We've also been able to appreciate the fact that also nations have been given responsibility to be able to kind of deal with disasters within their own jurisdictions. But we also seen the fact that communities at their own level, maybe decentralized level, they need also to be able to deal with disasters that affect them in one way or the other. So the question is, what can they use to be able to deal with the disasters that they face every day? I think we'll all agree on the fact that each and every community, wherever you come from, faces in some way the potential of being in a disaster at one given point. So the question is, how can we be able as communities to be able to face the disasters in front of us, or even the risks? And how can we even be able to see, for example, the indicators or the hazards that will be able to show us that a disaster is on the way coming? Like, what can we be able to see, or how can we be able to equip our communities to have even this know-how so that they can, so that at the end of the day, we can say that they're resilient and able to withstand the climate shocks that we're discussing today. So like in the introduction, it was said, I've worked with communities in Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda on the whole question of community managed disaster risk reduction, so CMDRR. And so we've tried to come up with strategies that try to help communities to be able to face the daily challenges that may face them. So I'll try to share some of the strategies that maybe we've been using and we've seen that they are working in trying to help communities to face the challenges that they face each and every day. So under CMDRR, we've come up with, or there's the principle of having participatory disaster risk assessment within communities. So under this principle is, it's important to understand the fact that communities have maybe disasters that affect them, but different people within communities, they face them differently and they have different perceptions on how they are. So for this case, for a community setup, if you want to understand the disasters maybe that you'll be able to be faced with, and maybe you want to build some form of a resilience strategy, the number one thing is to understand what are the risks in your community. But for you to understand these risks, it's important to bring each and everyone on board so that it's a participatory process where everyone is involved. One, in understanding the nature, understanding the intensity, and also understanding the behavior of past disasters and what were their indicators, in this case, hazards. So like I said, communities in participatory disaster risk reduction involve all community members. Here, by all, it means all, men, women, children, people with disabilities, and all these groups share their experiences. So for example, here the older generation probably could share how the patterns have been maybe over the last years that they've been in existence in the communities, what they have seen, how it's been changing, and how they see this impacting on them. And also here, we can try to bring in maybe the younger
Seems we have lost Juma for a minute. I think his network has. I think his network is failing, but let us give him a minute or two. As he plans to, as he maybe organizes himself, as I also find out what might have happened from his end. So just keep dropping your questions. I can see Lilian is answering some questions, and she has also dropped her email address. For those who wanted the slides, you can DM her like through her mail for purposes of the slide sharing. And you can also keep dropping your questions for both sessions. Thank you, Lilian, for agreeing to share your email address with us. So let me just find out what might have happened to Juma. In the meantime, keep dropping your questions. Keep dropping your questions for both sessions on the chat box. And so far, if you have any questions for Juma, please drop them on the chat box as well, so that we can capture them. I can see Lilian has shared her email. We are so grateful for that. You can ask for the slides directly for.
Hi, sorry. I think my internet disconnected. I'm so sorry.
No worries. We are grateful that you're back. We're glad you're back, so you can take on from there.
Sorry, okay, thank you. I don't know, had I stopped here or where was it? Maybe if I need to go back and just start afresh.
This is, no, I think, here.
I'm so sorry for that.
Yeah.
Yes, so as I was saying, in the PDRR, so participatory disaster risk reduction, it's important to have everyone on board just to ensure that each and everyone's perspectives are taken into consideration so that when you're coming up with any contingency measures, it takes into consideration everyone's needs. So here, when you're doing the participatory disaster risk assessments, the community identifies hazards in order of frequency of their occurrence that have occurred for the past 10 years, the warning signs that have been there, what have been the damages, and then how has the community been responding to the disaster, how have we been rehabilitating ourselves and maybe bouncing back. Also just trying to understand what have been some of the traditional methods that have been deployed to ensure that we deal with the disaster at hand. And maybe also if there have been some lessons like what have been the gaps that have been learned over the years that they think that can be able to be taken into consideration to come up with better or proper mitigation strategies. So when doing this, the assessment and the identification of the potential hazards or the risks that have been there, you or one should try to use the simplest language possible for the community to be able to understand. This can either be, if, for example, if you're in a setup where Swahili is like mostly used, you can try to use Swahili and maybe try to avoid using English. Try to ask the community, for example, to even name the hazards in their local dialects. As in this one makes people to be able to appreciate more and people like to understand better what they're talking about, as opposed to just maybe using jargons that people might not be able to understand very well. Also, if you are in a place where people do not understand Swahili, it's preferable that you try to use the local dialect. So in this case, the language of the local community. But also, even in terms of the dressing, you should try to fit yourself in the community the way it is. Like if you are a person from outside the community, try to ensure that you are able to engrave yourself in the community as much as possible, even if it's in terms of the dressing. For example, if it's the Maasai or if it's maybe a Muslim community and you are a lady and people, maybe you are going to a place where culture is much appreciated, it's very good that you try to also dress in a way that you'd fit in very easily, maybe also be able to do activities with them without maybe having second thoughts about maybe what they think about you. Number two, after you have assessed all the hazards and all the things that have happened in the past, you try to come up with or formulate a community managed disaster risk plans. So you try to look at, yes, now we know the risks. We have everything that is in front of us. We know what has been happening in the last 10 years. This is what the older generations have told us has been happening. This is what we are facing now probably as the new generation. So we try to map out a plan of how, first of all, a plan of all the resources we have in our community, but also trying to ensure that it's well captured in a way that is understandable to everyone. How can this be done? This can be done, for example, in a way that you try also to come up with drawings that will capture all the assets that the community has and try to show how they interrelate with each other and how they have been affected in the previous times that a disaster maybe has happened in their locality. So just to appreciate the fact that community managed disaster risk reduction shows the relationship between disaster and the development at the onset and offers solution at the onset. So you're trying to see like what will be the disaster and how will it affect us? And if we are able to come up with a proper mitigation strategy to this disaster, how will we be able to look after that? So here again, like I said, you try to analyze all the resources, try to identify what are the available assets and resources that can be used for building the capacity and plotting the distribution of access and use by taking into consideration the prevailing sensitivities within the community during and after the disasters. So with this plan, you can be able to know that in case, so for example, if you start seeing the hazards or the signs of a particular disaster coming up, you can try to come up with a potential solution that you think would be able to either reduce the impact of the disaster or reduce it in totality. The other component, after you've had the participatory risk analysis of the community, you've come up with a plan for the disaster risk reduction in the community. The next one is that you constitute village disaster management committees. So we all know that it's the people in the communities who understand better their problems. It is them that will face the challenges when they come upon them. So again, it's best on them to have some mechanisms or approaches to be able to deal with the problem at hand. As such, it is important to set up a CMDRR at the village level. And this should be composed of various stakeholders within the community. So for example, if it's just allocation, you can maybe have the chief involved, of course, representing the government. Maybe also have some women and youth group leaders within the region that are coming up and forming this committee. Ensure, of course, that you also include people with special needs, that their voices are also part of this committee, because again, disasters will impact them differently, and it's better that they be in there and try to give solution on how they think best, that if we take certain strategies, they'll be able to be protected as persons with disabilities. And also, of course, you can have civil society groups. So for example, our different institutions to try and come on board, but with the sole aim of course, coordinating the activities of our disaster management teams to account for and maintain to the inventory of community-based disaster preparedness materials. And of course, to be able to ensure continuous monitoring of disaster preparedness. So if we are able to have all these three components together, now my laptop is hanging, then we ask ourselves, but yes, we have all these three components. We have analyzed this together as a community. We have come together with a plan for the community. We have prepared a community disaster management committee. But then what is really, as in when can we say that a community is resilient? So I tried to look for some of the things I've been seeing, for example, in the previous projects we've been doing. And one is that the communities, to be said to be resilient, they have accumulated local knowledge about hazards and know-how, how to react to adverse situations that could be facing them. Also, these communities, now they have become survivors and not victims of the disasters that maybe could be facing them. And also, just looking at it from the human rights development approach, that basic rights are the foundation of safety and not just mere safety like that. That when we say that it's safety, we say that fundamental human rights are also like being safeguarded, even in the face of the disaster. And lastly, community organizations are mechanism for successful disaster risk initiative. Like the community organizations, like they're able to see what is coming in the community. They're able like to communicate the early warnings to their community members. Community members are able to take appropriate measures to ensure that they're secured. And after that, that everything becomes safe, but also that the community organizations are able to communicate with the respective governments of their jurisdictions. Because again, as we all know that governments like a major player in the country, they control almost everything. So it's good that we have also a link with either the county, but also the national government to be able to ensure that the disasters are dealt with appropriately. Just note here from the perspective of the government is that we'll see that for every county, for example, in Kenya, for 7 counties, they have all somehow developed either a disaster management plan or a disaster management policy that is linked to the national government disaster risk management policy. So if you're able to have all this, I think we're able to have like communities that are resilient and are able to adapt to changing climatic conditions in their respective jurisdictions. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to receive any questions or feedback.
Thank you very much, Juma. Thank you for being resilient, you know, and adapting. I can see the internet tried to distract us, but you had your disaster reduction or risk reduction measures in place. So you bounced back. So we are grateful for that. Thank you for the insightful presentation. So at this point, we are going to allow questions. So if you have a question for Juma, please raise your hand for time taking. You can also type in the chat box. I haven't seen any so far. I can see one no, it's not a question. I think it's just a comment. So I can see Jackson Wanyoni. Please proceed.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jacob.
Okay, yeah, my name is Jacob. I have a question. First of all, thank you for the nice presentations from the two speakers. I have a question to them. Either of them can respond to my question. I've been thinking of a project. I don't know if it's viable, but perhaps one of them can try to bring me to the line. But I'm looking at water conservation as a mitigation to climate change, and I'm looking at it from the gender perspective. I don't know, from the two speakers, from your projects, I don't know if from your own experience as you implement your projects, I don't know if you have come across the gender disparities in conserving water resources. Because I'm saying this because I don't know, women, especially in rural areas, have not been active in participating, either protecting the water resources or adding value, or actively participating in the activities that will make sure that our water sources are not going dry. Basically, that is my question. I don't know if you. Thank you.
I don't know if I should try responding now or I should wait first. Happy to begin by you, Paris.
Anyone else with a question? I can see a question on the chat box. I think I can read it out, maybe so that there are 3 or 4 so that you can combine. Coleman Longori asks that how do you enhance climate change resilience in a pastoral community? How do you enhance climate change resilience in a pastoral community? Anyone else with a question so that our speaker can collectively answer our questions without anyone feeling left out? Mary Minor, I can see you have raised your hand. Please proceed with your question.
Thank you to our presenters. My name is Mary Maina. It's not a question, but an appreciation of the point he made about the issue of being conversant and taking in reality of the local areas you're going to, in terms of the language, lifestyle, and even how you dress. Climate change language, if it's not well explained to the context of the people, at times they might not be able to get the point. I have experience working in Kilifi, Kwale, and some other coastal areas where it's just a distant thing you're mentioning. Well, you can see with experience that this is something which is home, but it depends of how you go down to the level in terms of the language and examples you are using. So that one hit home. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see Thomas Calacho I think that is, we can have that bunch of questions after Thomas's, then maybe you can keep asking and raising your hands for more questions. Juma, you can, after Thomas, you can go on and answer the question.
Thank you so much. I think Juma had a very good presentation, and there was someone who was asking about how you can actually integrate gender in the CMDRR. But then you see nowadays we're also talking about the issues of inclusivity as we deal with the community programs. Maybe Juma, you can address the issue of gender and also touch on the inclusivity and how best we can actually develop CMDRR strategies incorporating those two important aspects.
Okay. So thanks all for the questions, and also thank you for the positive feedback some of you have given. Of course, I will not pretend that I'm an expert in this question, so I'll try only to give from the best of my ability, and then of course my colleagues and also the participants, if you have better answers, I'm happy to also hear from you. But from the first question from Jacob, water conservation, mitigation to climate. So I just want to let you know that Jacob, for me too, I've worked in projects of water in all the countries, Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, and also Uganda. And what we used to do is using sand dams. Probably you know what sand dams are. But for those who don't know, it's just that trying to create a wall in the stream of a river, of course, in a place where there's rocky, and then you collect the sand that collects water, and then this water is used in the dry seasons, or like you have plenty of water to use even in the dry seasons, especially when the sand dams have matured. And the point you are raising about climate mitigation to climate, especially using water conservation, I think for me, it's something that can work, and especially from a gendered perspective. So one, appreciating the fact that we, as probably we all know, in Kenya, we are more or less a patriarchal society. So it means that for some duties, especially the home duties, are mostly done by women, especially things like fetching water, maybe looking for firewood and all sorts of things. But when you're able to bring about water and conserve it in a place where people are able to access it more easily and in a more secure way, it means that you are in one way or the other trying to enhance, first of all, the safety of the women that are going to fetch the water there, or also the girls that are going to fetch the water there. So the gender component somehow comes in automatically when you have like easy access to water. But also in terms of a mitigation and climate mitigation, we know, for example, that if you hold water somewhere in a pool, let me again use the example of the sand dams. In areas where you have a sand dam, there's always like some kind of a mini microclimate that is created because of the water, and it's draining into other soils around there. So you see, for example, like new species of birds, they come and stay there. Now there are trees growing around the area. And slowly by slowly, there's some kind of an ecosystem that is being made. And slowly by slowly, you see that you are conserving the environment. So I don't know, like for me, I would think that water is not just water, but is like a path to many other ways. Through the gender question that you are speaking about, and that in this case, women and girls' rights are well protected. Maybe they walk less distances to look for water. And of course, again, as a result, you know that maybe if girls were spending more time to look for water, maybe it can be reduced, and maybe they can use it for something else, maybe studying. And this will again have an impact on the education in schools. Yes, and then of course, the environment, if you conserve water in somewhere, it will have a ripple effect to the area. So water is not just for drinking or maybe using at home, but I always see it as a path to many other possibilities. Food security, be able to come out there. And again, there'll be a gender component when you look at food security, because again, it's mostly women that may be involved in the small scale farming, trying to get maybe vegetables for their families and things like this. So again, there's a gender component to that. I don't know if I've answered you well, but yes, happy to also hear from other presenters. The other question that was asked was resilience in a pastoral community. How do you enhance resilience in a pastoral community? So like I was presenting, I think for me is, first of all, trying to do a PDRR, like a participatory disaster risk assessment that involves everyone, trying to analyze and try to understand like what are the hazards of some of the disasters we've been facing as a community, maybe as a pastoral community. And then when have they been happening? What have been their frequency? What has been done before? And how can you be able to change this going forward? If you're able to do this, it means that once you see the hazards earlier, like the early warning signs earlier, as a community, you can be able to migrate because it's pastoral community. You can be able to migrate from that place where you think that there'll be maybe drought and move to other areas where that is, where it is maybe going to be having some rainfall. But also we know that, for example, now there are also some traditional methods that are being used, for example, in the issues of drought. I don't know if probably you know, it's the concept of the movable bombers, where that if you know that there'll be drought in one place, that people have made homesteads for their animals and they move these bombers to somewhere else. Then as they leave the place where they have left, I see you hands are up. Maybe I'll ask you guys to come in later. As you leave the place you're living, the grass is able to come up again. And once the grass ends where you've gone with your animals and the bombers, the movable bombers, you're able to come back once there's green grass where you had left before. So this way you go like having patches all around of green grass, and you'll always like be making a rotation around. And as such, you're able to adapt and remain resilient even in the face of drought. On the question of gender mainstreaming in DRR, like I said, you cannot achieve a successful DRR strategy or mechanism if you do not involve everyone. And everyone here also includes children, women, men, and the youths. Like these issues affect all these groups differently. So just ensuring that their voices are being brought up and being included into whatever strategies are coming up will be very paramount in ensuring that each and everyone is protected wholesomely, including also, I had forgotten to mention this, maybe people with disabilities, just to ensure that everyone is taken care of. So the gender components, for example, if you are choosing people, for example, to be in the communities disaster management committee, you must ensure that there must be some kind of quotas, that this number will be for women, this number will be for men, this number will be for people with disability, this number will be for youths, and maybe also children, this number, just to ensure that everyone's voice is heard and no one is left out. Happy to give to my colleague if she has anything to add. But I can see also 2 hands up.
Okay, sure. If I may go on, Paris, I could add to what Juma said.
Okay.
So
oh, your hand was up here. Yeah, briefly. Yeah. So just before you jump in, colleagues, as Lilian takes up, I've shared a link on the chat box. Please fill in so that we can capture the mails. I'm seeing so many addresses which I can't capture them all. Fill in the short survey to help us improve on maybe our next webinar, and most importantly to capture the emails for information sharing. So Lilian, I think you can pick up and maybe, I think so, that must be a question. Maybe you will pose your question after Lilian. Thank you.
Thank you, Paris, and thank you, Juma, for the enriching presentation and for the responses. Now I'd wish to give a practical response to the questions and to the response that you've given. So in terms of the pastoralists, how do you increase their resilience? I've shared a link to one of our projects we have in Ethiopia, which is called EthioTrees, which deals with pastoralists in the northern region of Ethiopia, which is a dry area. So some of the things they have been doing to make sure to survive this climate change, they are doing enclosures, they are doing water harvesting and storage. They are ensuring the soil is healthy using their local techniques they have. And then a lot of community togetherness and education and diversification of what they do. So there are a couple of things that can be adopted based on the community and based on the setting as to where they are. So feel free to have a look at those documents from the project. Make it a good read for you to see what other people are doing and how they are coping. And they're doing very well with that. Then in terms of water conservation, there was a question about water conservation. we have another project again in Kenya where they're doing it's called the Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund. So what they're doing with this project, I've also shared the link on the chat. What they're doing, they're trying to conserve the watershed that supplies water to Nairobi. And we get water from around the Mount Kenya region, areas of Laikipia and thereabout. So what they've done, they have involved the farmers in this region to conserve the area so that the water would, the process, percolation and everything, so that we have groundwater and the rivers flow nicely. So Dakaine is having good water that supplies to Nairobi. So they've engaged in this to make sure they have funds to run the different project activities, which include themselves having the water, because there has been a big fight with these communities where they complain that we supply water to Nairobi, yet we don't have water. So they are doing water dams within their farms, and this involves the whole family where they come together and do their farm planning, and everyone gets to benefit from the water resources that they get to harvest, among other benefits they get from the project. So for more details, you can also indulge into this and read about the project and get ideas to better improve what you have in mind and to customize it based on the setting that you have. Thank you.
Someone had their hand raised. Maybe you can ask your question. Then I can see a question.
Thank you.
Chat box. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so my question circles in back to matters concerning gender. So in relation to access and control of natural resources, actually it's a good question. So in relation to the access and control of natural resources, there has been prevailing risks pertaining to gender-based violence in relation to the environment, climate change, and natural resource management. So what are some of the linkages that is creating this situation, and what are some of the strategies that can be used to navigate such issues? I hope I was clear.
Our speakers, any of you can jump in and answer. I hope her question was clear.
Maybe she could throw that again, please.
Pardon,
okay.
Pardon us, please.
Okay, so I was asking, in relation to access and control of natural resources, there have been prevailing pertaining to gender violence when it comes to environment, climate change, and even natural resource management. So in view of access to control of such natural resources, what are some of the linkages between gender-based violence and the environment? And also, what are some of the mitigation strategies that can be used around the same?
I don't have an answer for you because I've not worked in a situation where issues of tenure and access to natural resources have led to GBV in our setting and what to do. But what I'd say that would reduce that is bringing people together and having conversations around that. That's what I think, if it was to arise around the communities that I work with, is to bring the different groups together and have them discuss this, and maybe get a formula where you have user groups who, delineation, zonation of user area. If that's the kind of gender violence you're talking about. I don't know if it's household or it's out there where they fight. So yes, that's from me.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe Juma, maybe you can add something, but if not, I believe maybe there are also experts in here, maybe who might be having some answers to these questions. You can also type in the responses there, because we are all learning and sharing. So in case there's an expert who might be knowing something, you can also type in the chat box. There was a question on the chat box. someone was asking that whether like can motivation of community members increase climate change resilience?
If motivation is in terms of money, I've seen it working in our projects, in our areas, and living in a community where we have the Mikoko Pamoja project, because it goes beyond the climate resilience and goes to community resilience, if I may say, because if you incentivize them, then they are able to better take care because they look forward to getting something from their efforts. So they'll take care of the environment, and in turn, the environment will take care of them. So we have resilience going both ways. But where you go and just tell people, okay, now we are going to plant trees, they'll plant trees today. You come back again after some time, they'll be planting, you'll not be growing anything, but maybe you'll be giving them some sort of motivation for this. So always good to motivate, and also to go beyond the monetary motivation, and make sure you educate, make sure you capacitate them so that they can diversify beyond the expectations of income from their efforts, so that they're able to use the resource that they have more sustainably and optimally. So motivation, of course, anybody needs motivation. That's why we are all here.
Yes, if I may just add something on that, there's a principle in environmental law and policy called PES, Payment for Ecosystem Services. So in this case, is that the people in downstream or people in upstream, they commit to protect a certain given ecosystem or environment. For example, maybe it could be a water source. And then the people downstream will be able maybe to be paying, as they're using the service coming from this resource, they pay some money to benefit from this resource. Then part of the money goes back to the community upstream, and they benefit in some way, maybe building of roads, hospitals, or something like that. So, and in return, the community upstream is obligated to try and protect the environment of the ecosystem that is in their jurisdiction. So this in some way acts as a motivating factor for them to kind of protect the environment in which they are living in, and also to ensure that people downstream kind of their continued existence is assured. Maybe just to share this.
Yeah, and in the carbon markets, it's basically a PES approach to this. So you're being paid for the ecosystem service that you're providing, that is the carbon sequestration.
All right, okay. Thank you very much for the questions. I can't see any more hands. I just do not want to lock down anyone who has a burning question. So Juma, we will share his slides. We'll share his slides. So we'll share his slides. Once you filled in the survey, I'm sure we'll get your email there, so we'll be able to share with you the slides. So thank you very much, Juma. Thank you very much, Lilian, for the very educative sessions that we've had. Indeed, I must say that I've learned a lot. It was a 2-hour worth it. I feel like we can go on and on, but because of time constraints, we might not be able to proceed more. But I will welcome my colleague Elkanah as we plan to conclude this. So Elkanah, maybe you can jump in. Just as Elkanah prepares himself to come in, I can see a question on the chat box, and someone is asking, how can we enhance Africa's participation in carbon markets? And I think that question, for me, first, when the first time I heard about carbon markets, and just to add a question on top of a question so that maybe you can answer this for us as well. You know, we really, like, do people really understand this carbon market thing? You know, when you hear carbon markets and you're like, so how carbon credits, you know, from a layman's point of view, like, so how do I get money? How do I start selling this, you know? And I think after this session, I have really got like a good explanation on carbon markets and how Plantivo works. I heard of carbon markets and all that from Vera first, and now I can see there are very many organizations working in the same way Plantivo is working. So I think you can answer, like, do you think that our communities have really understood these carbon market things, or there needs to be more and more enlightenment concerning carbon markets and how to be participants in this?
Okay. It's always been the thing is mostly run internationally, so maybe that's why the challenge has always been. And then I don't want to get a bit political, but we also have issues with who represents us in these forums. So, but currently with the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, we are having changes, and we're seeing Africa waking up to this, because now they're able to engage Annex 1 countries in trading. I hope I'm not speaking too much jargon on this, but I'll throw it out there. Then you can have a few things to go look at, and they'll guide you to the right trade, yeah? So Annex 1 are these mostly developed countries. So now, as it is under the Article 6, we are, as developing countries, able to engage these countries and sell and do the trading as it's happening in the compliant market. And we can do this and balance out with our indices at the same time. So what's happening in Africa, you'll see a lot of initiatives in terms of the legal framework. We see Ghana. Ghana has been on the front line for this. Senegal, but of course, Kenya has always had the best documentation. So what is happening in Kenya right now, we're having the climate change bill being amended, and we had the public participation, which closed last month in May, on 26th, sorry. So we are hoping to see the bill going through very soon. And they're also doing a carbon market strategy on how the country engages, because it's been left to the prerogative of whoever is running it. So this is being outlined in law, and the ministry is taking kind of charge of this. Actually, it's starting right from the presidency, because you remember also the what is this called? The committee for the climate change, the National Climate Change Council is headed by the president. And look back at the few meetings he's had with Singapore, with what is this other country, about selling the carbon and engaging in what we call the ITMOS, yeah? So Africa is moving forward now because there's something they can go for it. And as Kenya, we are looking at carbon being #2 exports, Anna, after agriculture, is it? Yes, but #2 after #1. So there's growth in this. People have seen the potential to earn from carbon. And yeah, but I hope it will generally benefit all of us at the end of the day, and above all, our environment. Yes, and thank you, Paris, for knowing now that we don't pack carbon in gunias to take to the markets. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That is so informative, because I'm just imagining, you know, that mama in the village or that youth would hear, you know, carbon markets, and they're like, oh, what's this anyway? But thanks to such sessions. Thank you very much, Lilian. Thank you very much, Juma. It was a very, very great session with you guys. Thank you for taking your time to share such great knowledge with us. For our participants, thank you for being so active. And I'm grateful that from the chat box, I can see that the session was so impactful to each and every one of you. We are glad for that. At this point, I will wrap up from my end, but allow our organizer, K4R, to give us a few wrapping up nuggets as we conclude. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Paris. Thank you, Juma. Thank you, Lilian. It has been a very informative session with you. And thank you to everyone who has joined us. This has been extremely interactive. I can see everybody is so interested in learning from each other. Elkanah has posted the link to the survey. So for the webinar, kindly fill in that form. That form will allow us to get your email addresses so that we can get in contact with you. This will also help us to send the information that has been shared in the chat box. And then I have seen a few questions about about a WhatsApp group or just coming together to share more ideas and more information. There is currently a Kenya for Resilience WhatsApp group. Kindly follow the link to register for the website. Once you register for the website, then we know that you are a member of K4R, and then we can add you to the WhatsApp group. So please just follow the links, and then we can interact more in the WhatsApp group and even in emails. There are several people who have shared their emails. So feel free to take down any emails that you see from people in organizations that you would want to interact with. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will give maybe 5 minutes so that people can fill in the survey and also register for the K4R website to become a member. But otherwise, thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure hosting this webinar, and we are so excited to have another one coming very soon. And more information about that will be on our Facebook page, which is Kenya for Resilience, or our Instagram. You can also find us on LinkedIn as well at Kenya for Resilience, and we can interact more. So thank you very much. The links are still open. I will end the meeting in 5 minutes. So feel free to continue sharing and interacting with each other.
Thank you, K4R. I think this is the point where you can drop your LinkedIn profile, your Instagram to connect and to network. You can fill in the survey. If you've already filled it in, you can connect with 1 or 2 people, catch up, and because I believe that this race, we can only win it through collaboration and through partnerships. You can also follow K4R in Facebook and LinkedIn as well, and also Instagram. You can be doing that within the 5 minutes. Maybe there's a friend you saw and this is the time to ask maybe for their email address. This is the time to check out them on the maybe LinkedIn and follow them and do a friend request, or follow them on Instagram, get to know what they're doing. Yeah, because I believe this is a work of, we have to partner if we need results ASAP. So, yeah. I would have shared some music with you to keep you busy as you fill in the survey, but I do not want to burn with my genre of music. Maybe I like the ones that will make people sleep, so allow me not to share any music to keep you. So maybe you can turn on your music and just fill in the survey as you ponder on the information that has been shared with you. Yeah.
I will just respond to Rashid Mzee and anyone else who might have something similar. Rashid, kindly register on the website to first become a K4R member. And then once your request has been approved, then you will be added to the group. One more minute before we end the webinar. So if you have not filled in the survey, kindly do so. It has been posted by Alkana. I will repost again just in case anybody has missed it. I can see people sharing their contacts, their LinkedIn. Thank you for doing so. Thank you so much for the interaction. Okay, 5 minutes have elapsed. Thank you so much to every single one of you who has joined the webinar. K4R is extremely grateful and very thankful for all of you. We hope to see you again in our next webinar. Have a great evening and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. See you.